along with your other compatriots, right, fellas? It's a great team of owners, and that's very important. But he said they'd love it, and I think he'd like to do it himself. So we'll get out of here, and we will run. We'll sprint down, and we'll see the Oval Office, which is really something to see, you know? It's funny, people come from all over, the biggest people, the richest people, the most powerful people, and they come and they go into the Oval Office and they just stare. Oh, wow, that's something. They all have beautiful offices. They have offices that are the best in the world in many cases, but they love the Oval Office. So with all of that, I'd like to now introduce you to the Dodgers chairman, Mark Walter, to say a few words, and then we're going to follow that up with Clayton, who's going to say a couple of things, and that's a great representative of a great team. Thank you very much. Mark, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We're very pleased to participate in the tradition of bringing champions to the White House. Last season was an incredible season. We won the World Series. Second time in 2020, and since 2020, and only 8 times in our seasons, our history. We played in front of almost 4 million fans, and we had many millions more on television. Our global following has soared, and not only from Shohei Ohtani, but also from Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Clayton Kershaw, and many, many more. Alongside this on-field success, we have been deeply immersed in our community. Our players and managers have supported have each had foundations and support for communities. Our trust last year has committed $100 million to help Chicago or LA Fire. And so on behalf of the organization, I want to thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, wow, this is an incredible honor for me, and to stand here today representing the Los Angeles Dodgers and this group of staff and players behind me today. The 2024 Los Angeles Dodgers season is one that will go down the history books, always holding a special place in the hearts of myself and those there with me, as well as millions of Dodger fans around the world. This organization exemplifies what it means to come together as one for a greater purpose and to represent something so much bigger than themselves. The selflessness and humility that each one of these players and staff have shown over the last year is truly an inspiration. They have constantly played hurt, switched positions, and taken the ball to put the team first. As a spectator for our championship run last year, I was in awe of this group. Their unwavering confidence, coupled with a selfless pursuit for team excellence, was an inspiration. That is why I'm so grateful to get to speak today on their behalf, as I know none of them would say this about themselves. Moving forward, I hope the 2024 Dodgers can serve as an inspiration to many like they were to me, not just in sports, but in life, remembering to put others before ourselves. It moves a team and a society forward. So thank you for allowing me to speak today, because the story of the 2024 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers is a true joy to get to tell, and it's because of the extraordinary people that are behind me and their incredible pursuit of excellence. Thank you. And Mr. President, we have a gift for you as well.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, I like that. Wow. Ooh, I like that. Come on, Mark.
Oh, they're going to move it. Okay.
Right here first, sir. 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
president, their team jersey, the world champion Los Angeles Dodgers. Let's go back and play the music, guys. Let's go ahead and play it. Don't cut the audio. The president's going to lead them to the Oval Office right now. I think the Dodgers are going to go on a very special trip to the Oval Office. What we're going to do is toss to, we're going to carry this through, I think, all the way through to Charlie Kirk. To Charlie Kirk. Now, president's promised the Dodgers a special trip down to over to the Oval Office. He said it's very rarely done. The Dodgers are in town to play Washington tonight. So today, that's why I started at 11 o'clock. There they go right there. Very special occasion for the President of the United States. As you know, President Trump is a longtime Yankees fan. He just had some great comments about his experiences in baseball. President Trump played baseball at the New York Military Academy when he was in prep school. President Trump also was a good friend of George Steinbrenner. And when Steinbrenner bought the club and started turning around the Yankees after CBS had owned it, the big rivalry was obviously between the Dodgers and the Yankees there in the 70s and the 80s when the Dodgers had those great teams and Steinbrenner was rebuilding it. We're going to go to there we go right there. We're going to toss to Charlie Kirk. Once again, want to thank Brian Glenn and the Real America's Voice team for being live there. There goes the Dodgers right there as they funnel off the stage. The entire World Championship team showed up. They gave President Trump a jersey. President Trump was reminiscing about George Steinbrenner. He said, hey, you want to know what work is? Sitting next to George Steinbrenner for a 9-inning game up in the owner's box. Because Steinbrenner would be calling down to the bullpen. He'd be yelling at his coaches, his managers, and plus giving play-by-play commentary. Okay, we're going to toss to Charlie Kirk in a moment. Let me do a reset right here. Markets are on fire throughout the world. President Trump is dug in. He's not budging. And big breaking news just came out a moment ago as President Trump, thank you. We finally got
Charlie Kirk Show starts now.
Why we have to do what we're doing. $1.2 trillion trade deficit. We've exported $18 billion worth of our wealth since China joined the WTO in 2001 by running these trade deficits. And we've given away our houses, our office buildings, our food supply, our farmland. That's got to stop. It's threatening our economic prosperity, national security.
So just in point of fact, the reason that the European Union, even though they are our fourth biggest market for agricultural products, as you know, don't take as much American pork as you would like is because they have issues with hormones used in pork. I don't want to get into a whole debate over that, but it's not an issue about tariffs. Conservative economists at the American Enterprise Institute.
But wait, hold on, Jake. No. This is really important. You can't just say that. So here's the bottom line. They are using fake science and unsubstantiated claims to not take our products. So it isn't just that they have high tariffs. Thank you for making this point for me, by the way. I meant to make it. It's not just the tariff numbers. It's the way they've treated our products. Oh, sorry, we can't take your beef since 2002 because you use a certain type of feed. That's just absolute bull. It is not correct and not appropriate. Our supplies, our farmers and ranchers, we produce the safest, the most secure, the best food in the world. And so to use that for the EU to say, oh my goodness, we can't do it because of this reason, it's absolutely wrong and it's not based on sound science.
Okay.
The bottom line is this. In the last 4 years, the cost of inputs for our farmers went up 30%. In the last 4 years, we had an agriculture export deficit that increased from zero when President Trump left to $49 billion. Our farming and our farmers and ranchers are hurting. They are operating at margins of profit that are thinner than they have in a really long time due to the policies of the last 4 years. The long term, the tariffs worked. I mean, the research shows that we had an increase increase in jobs, et cetera, until, frankly, the Biden administration stopped enforcing some of those, the deal once we left office in 2021.
The Treasury Secretary said on another network, we're going to hold the course. It's not the kind of thing you can negotiate away in days or weeks. That makes it sound like the tariffs are staying in place at least for days or weeks. Is that correct, or is the president considering postponing implementation to negotiate?
There is no postponing. They are definitely going to stay in place for days and weeks. That is sort of obvious. The president needs to reset global trade. Everybody has a trade surplus, and we have a trade deficit. We are paying away our future and our lives. The countries of the world are ripping us off, and it's got to end. The president has made it crystal clear. This is the policy we are going to protect. The factories that come build in America, we are going to protect them. They're going to be successful. That's why they're going to build in America, the greatest economy in the earth.
We saw during COVID that optimal supply chains are not resilient. And what I could say is the only good outcome from COVID is it was a beta test for what would happen if our supply chains got broken. And President Trump has decided that we cannot be at risk like that for our crucial medicines, for semiconductors, for shipping. And we are going to move forward so the American people can know that they are going to have a more secure future.
Well, Chris, I want my cake and eat it too as well. So I want to bring the jobs back to America. End of the day, I do want zero tariffs. You know, growing up in Kansas, since the day I was born, I've heard farmers say, you know, why does Europe have a 50% tariff on American agriculture? India, 100, Canada, 200. And beyond the tariffs, it's the non-tariff barriers. A lot of those countries simply won't let agriculture products into those countries. So yes, short-term pain, long-term gain, bring the jobs back, and then get to true free reciprocal tariffs.
I got a report from the USTR last night that more than 50 countries have reached out to the president to begin a negotiation. But they're doing that because they understand that they bear a lot of the tariff. And so I don't think that you're going to see a big effect on the consumer in the U.S. because I do think that the reason why we have a persistent long-run trade deficit is these people have very inelastic supply. They've been dumping goods into the country in order to create jobs, say, in China.
Every day is a battle for your mind raging. Information coming from every angle with the will to deceive. Fear not. You found the place for truth. The voice of a generation that still has the will to believe in the greatest country in the history of the world. This is the Charlie Kirk Show. Buckle up. Here we go.
Okay, everybody, radio stations across the country, honored to be with you as always. I will be heading on the campus at the University of South Carolina momentarily, but first, we are here breaking down all of the news of the day. In fact, news is moving so quickly. It is moving at such an accelerated pace right now that it is difficult to keep up. It is moving so quick, we have to basically have 5 different chats open of different responses from foreign nations regarding tariff threats, regarding reciprocity. So there is a lot going on here, but instead of going into all the details, because that's just going to change by every 5 minutes, I think we need to take a step back and reset the foundational framework, to reset a 30,000-foot view of exactly what's going on here. President Donald Trump has been railing against bad trade deals for the last 30 or 40 years. President Donald Trump, as a businessman, identified trade deficits. And the way trade is supposed to be constituted is we do what we do best and you do what you do best, and we will barter. By doing so, you will make us wealthier and we will trade and we will both be able to have a flourishing future. What ended up happening in the 1990s and early 2000s, in the 1990s, there were three critical mistakes made by Bill Clinton: the entrance of China into the World Trade Organization, the NAFTA, and also the repeal of the idea of investment bank and commercial banks. That's a whole separate issue for another time. But the conflation of investment and commercial banks allowed the cheap flow of money to go into the capital markets in a way that specific deregulation, I think, actually led us to the 2008 financial crisis and the lords of easy money leading us closer and closer to fiscal and financial apocalypse. Now, free trade did make the stock market go up. Nobody is doubting that. Unlimited, unfettered free trade did make the 10% do very well. I am part of the 10%. I can say this as somebody who is part of the evil 10% of the country. When you are on the upper part of the socioeconomic ladder, specifically, if you do work that does not involve your hands, but only involves your brain, that does not involve your body, but only involves your brain, free trade is traditionally a great idea because we became an information economy and a consumer economy and not an industrial one. We thought because we were entering into a technological revolution, because that we were entering into a brave new world of unfettered, unapologetic free trade, that we would no longer need to make stuff. In fact, that is what the third world does. The idea was that the third world will make our products for us and that we will be able to become wealthier. Francis Fukuyama famously wrote a book called The End of History. The assumption was permanent U.S. dominance. It was a post-Cold War mentality. It was that neoliberalism is the end of history. Fukuyama wrote in The End of History that this will be the end of war, that neoliberalism was the apex of civilization. Neoliberalism was, of course, invade the world, invite the world. The idea of the Western liberal order will be able to be spread to all corners of the world, and we will end the eschaton. The eschaton, of course, is a Christian view of when Christ rules earth for 1,000-year reign. Immanentizing the eschaton is what the free traders thought they were going to get. In fact, I remember growing up, I was in 6th grade at MacArthur Middle School, right there on Palatine Road, right where I grew up. And I remember we would watch, they had these morning news bits. I forgot the name of it. Maybe Blake would know. It was like 5 to 10 minutes long. It was like mandatory must runs. And I remember one of them. I'll think of it. I bet I could find it in a break. Anyway, it was the news clips. In one of them, they said, can you find a single thing when you're walking through a parking lot at Walmart and ask people what they bought that was made in America? And the answer was no. And of course, all my 6th grade classmates were like, that's wrong, that's wrong. And I remember the teacher would interject, and I wouldn't even say the teacher was liberal, the teacher was neoliberal. And the teacher would interject and say, no, this is a good thing. This made us wealthier. We don't have to do that work. We are liberated. In fact, what we were told, what I was told growing up, is that free trade would then make it where the Russians will be wearing Levi jeans, eating McDonald's, taking selfies, at the time, just listening to iPods. And it's not even that it's a bad thing for other things to be made in other countries. Of course not. We want a competition. We want markets. We do not want no trade. Instead, it is when nothing is made in America, or next to nothing, when it's such a small percentage. When making something in America, almost people look differently at you. Why would you do that? Now, we also must be fair. We have to be fair in our analysis. partially, but not mainly, partially as to why the corporate class decided to move these jobs overseas is that unions got very greedy in the 1970s and 1980s. This is a lesser appreciated component of this analysis, is unions thought that they were too big for their bridges. They were like, what are you going to leave? Literally, some of the labor unions would look at the corporate class and say, we want a 40% increase in wages. We want more days off. And the corporate class decided to get back at the unions. America became less competitive. Now, again, a lot of the Trump coalition is union labor. However, as Blake astutely pointed out, find one part of the American economy that is mass unionized that isn't totally awful. It's really hard to find. In the fact where mass unionization, especially public sector unionization, public sector teacher unions, public sector janitorial unions, public sector government unions, I think that there's a place, for example, a carpenters union. They're very good at training. They're very good at apprenticeship. However, there needs to be a balance between capital and labor. And what happened, of course, is the capital, the corporate class, having no allegiance to the United States of America, and the fact that unions overreached and unions got cocky, they looked at the corporate class in the eye and said, we're American labor. What, are you going to really go and make that trinket in China? And the McKinsey type said, yep. That's exactly what we're going to do, actually. And it was made easier by this decision. Understand what President Donald Trump is doing is fixing and remedying the mistakes of past. If you had to go look at what is the original sin as to why we are in the place that we are in, there are many places, there are many decisions. But the one where we actually have it on tape, rarely do you have the original sin on tape. And it was televised on C-SPAN. And that is when we decided to make what was then a third world and maybe a second world country to have entrance into the World Trade Organization. This was a glide path. We did not do this to try and make us have greater harmony with China. In fact, you could make an argument that our relations with China were probably better before China went into the World Trade Organization. The free trade zealots told us that trade will bring us peace. In fact, it turns out that mass trade with China brought us closer and closer to conflict. President Donald Trump is fixing this problem from Bill Clinton. Play cut 121.
The WTO agreement will move China in the right direction. It will advance the goals America has worked for in China for the past 3 decades. And, of course, it will advance our own economic interests. Economically, this agreement is the equivalent of a one-way street. It requires China to open its markets with a fifth of the world's population, potentially the biggest markets in the world, to both our products and services in unprecedented new ways. All we do is to agree to maintain the present access which China enjoys. Chinese tariffs from telecommunications products to automobiles to agriculture will fall by half or more over just 5 years. For the first time, our companies will be able to sell and distribute products in China made by workers here in America without being forced to relocate manufacturing to China, sell through the Chinese government, or transfer valuable technology. For the first time, we'll be able to export products without exporting jobs.
Boy, there was so much wrong with that. I'll analyze that after the break. You look at that, there's still joint technology transfers. We are not allowed to sell our products in China. Our technology companies are not allowed to sell in the interior of China. ReliefFactor.com, 100% drug-free Relief Factor, knee pain, back pain, joint pain, elbow pain. Check it out right now at ReliefFactor.com. Relief Factor, with their 3-week quick start, it's only $19.95, less than $1 a day. Try it and see how it can help you turn back the clock on pain. Visit ReliefFactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF. That is 1-800-4RELIEF. Relief Factor doesn't simply mask your pain for a short period of time. Developed by doctors, Relief Factor is a 100% drug-free supplement. So check it out right now at ReliefFactor.com. That is ReliefFactor.com. Get out of pain today with the 100% drug-free supplement, ReliefFactor.com. Email me directly, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to our podcast. We'll be right back.
Stop watching the news and start making some. The Charlie Kirk Show.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. I am about to be on campus all week. University of South Carolina. We have Illinois State University, University of Illinois, Purdue University, and Michigan State University. Next week, we have Boise State University, Washington State University. After that, we have Texas A&M and then University of Wyoming. And that is not even the full agenda. If you guys want to know the people that make that campus tour possible, it's yrefy.com. That is yrefy.com. If you have private student loan debt, they can help get you out of debt. That is yrefy.com. yrefy.com. Again, many clients aren't even able to make the minimum monthly payment on their private student loans. May not be available in all 50 states. If you go to YRefi, you can read testimonials from other people who have been where you are and how they've escaped student loan debt. You can even see what their monthly payments were versus what they are now. Just call 888-YREFI34 or log on to YRefi.com. That is YREFY.com. May not be available in all 50 states. Bad credit is accepted. Let's face it, if you have distressed or defaulted private student loans, nobody is coming to bail you out. Go to yrefy.com. That is yrefy.com. Again, they are the sponsor of our very popular, very viral campus tour. Go to yrefy.com. Email me, freedom@charliekirk.com. Okay, everybody, welcome back. You are living through history. You're living through the attempted realignment of a failed rules-based international order. This is one of the reasons why President Trump's approval rating is gone up. President Trump's daily tracker of approval rating went up last week after the application of tariffs. It's so fascinating to me. I feel as if I live in two different realities. And I say this, by the way, as someone who is very invested in the stock market. Now, thankfully, I have a great person and team that helps manage that stuff, I was only down a couple percent. Well, a lot of other people were down a lot more. You could, have hedges, buy the VIX, you can have buffers, all that stuff. But I feel as if I live in two different realities. I was walking around Arizona, a certain part of Phoenix, Arizona this weekend, and a very wealthy guy came up and he was very worried. Came up to me, Charlie, what does Trump think with these tariffs? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I said, look, everything I'm going to tell you privately, I also say publicly. I have no inside information. And if I did, I certainly wouldn't just share it with you. Very worried. He said, my portfolio's down, my market's down, so on and so forth. Okay. Kind of almost freaking out. And then in the other's reality, when I went out to dinner with my wife, guy comes up to me and he says, Charlie, I'm a welder. This is the greatest week I've ever seen in politics. I said, what do you mean? He said, finally, someone is giving the middle finger to the corporate class, and they're going to defend those of us that work for a living. Us blue-collar workers have a fighter in the White House, and we've been waiting for it. Now, I'm not even saying one is right and one is wrong. They both are very valued constituencies. One is the capital class, and one is the labor. And properly understood and properly balanced, you have hopefully some brokered equilibrium between capital and labor. Understand the top 10%, which I am part of and many of the audience are part of, own about 88% of the equities. Now, it's a little deceiving because a lot of teachers and a lot of janitors and a lot of people that have 401ks, they might get blended into a major wealth management fund. Nobody is happy with what's going on with the stock market. But again, 10% of Americans own 88% of equities. The next 40% own 12% of the stock market. And the bottom 50% has debt. They have credit card bills, they rent their homes, and they have auto loans. And they've been screaming and crying for some relief. What's even worse is if Trump didn't do anything about this. And I'm not even talking about economically, because this is a risk. This is a gamble. We must be honest with this is an economic gamble. There is a risk associated with it. I think it's going to work out. I trust Stephen Miller, and I trust Susie Wiles, and I trust Scott Bessent, and I trust J.D. Vance. And of course, most importantly, I trust President Trump. But there is a risk. There is a gamble involved in all of this. But the greater risk would be if you run on tariffs and you don't apply them. That would be the end of democracy as we know it. That means you could pander to a constituency endlessly to just go get their votes, and you don't do it. That, to be perfectly honest with you, is far more horrifying and terrifying to the health of our politics than the stock market going down. And I know the stock market right now going down is hurting a lot of people. And look, this could go terribly wrong. Europe and China are going to be the main countries that will most likely escalate. There could be a de-dollarization. A lot of our wealth in this country is built on the fact that we are the world's reserve currency. So this is a high wire. This is a live wire act, one that I support. The markets knew this was coming, and Trump gave plenty of notice, and still we are seeing a sell-off. But I think back to that blue-collar guy that came up to me. So this is the best week of politics I've ever seen. And the contrast, the people that own in the market think this is terrible. The people that have built the country think this is wonderful. I would like to have them both think something is wonderful. However, if you look at the last 5 years, Wall Street has done very, very well. Main Street has not done very well the last 5 years. Been crushed by inflation, being crushed by consumer debt. They don't own homes. And they have been screaming at their politicians, please listen to us. Please do something for us. And that is what Donald Trump embodied, which is why, regardless of what Trump said or how they attacked him, the working class continued to rise up in record numbers. And now President Trump is delivering it. He is the promise keeper president. We've seen that on the border. The idea of these tariffs is to smoke out behavior targeted at American exports. And some of it is direct tariffs, but it's not only that. There's a lot of howling going on right now, and some of it is understandable. A lot of countries got used to the existing system. Well, Trump is starting our 1,000-mile journey with a great big leap. But most importantly is he's fulfilling the promises that he made. And you want to see a much more dramatic, horrifying political moment? If President Trump would have just said, just kidding, just like every other politician, I say one thing and do another. Instead, it's promises made, promises kept. Be right back.
Back to this Real America's Voice news break. I'm Terrence Bates. Dozens of countries are reportedly ready to negotiate in the face of President Trump's tariffs. Taiwan's president, for instance, is offering zero tariffs in return for the U.S. dropping its trade barriers. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expected to ask for a reprieve on the 17% tariffs against his country during an Oval Office visit coming up here shortly. And when it comes to China and the European Union, the president says his tariffs are all about leveling the playing field after being ripped off for years.
We have massive surplus countries that we're dealing with. We have massive deficits. We've got to straighten that out because you can't continue to be that way. It's been that way for years now, and it can't go on any longer. And we're the piggy bank. We have all the advantages. Forget markets for a second. We have all the advantages. We're going to straighten out. We're going to become a wealthy nation again, wealthy like never before.
U.S. customs officials are reportedly collecting the across-the-board 10% tariffs already. The higher reciprocal tariffs of between 11 and 50% on individual countries are set to take effect on Wednesday. A weekend of storms and massive flooding have at least 18 people dead and communities from Texas to Ohio drying out and preparing for a week of insurance claims. Kentucky and Tennessee are dealing with the worst of the flooding as some rivers there have risen to near record levels. The flooding has been brought on by nonstop rain for days. As a result, utilities in some areas have cut off power and gas. Emergency officials in north central Kentucky have ordered mandatory evacuations for a couple of towns near the bend of the Licking River, that's what it's called. As the water continues to rise, the situation is a frightening reminder of 30 years ago when the river reached a record 50 feet, resulting in 5 deaths and 1,000 homes destroyed. The World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers take over the White House. The team is in Washington to play the Nationals, but first stop by the White House to meet with President Trump. As is tradition, the team gave 47 a Dodgers jersey with his name on it before getting a private tour of the Oval Office. That's a quick check of your headlines. We appreciate you being here with us. Now, let's get you back to the Charlie Kirk Show.
Will not be silenced. You're listening to The Charlie Kirk Show.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us, as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. I got to tell you, this is one of my favorite stories, and I saw this on X the other day. I said, book this guy. I love it from 5 different directions, and I'll explain in a second. But first, My Patriot Supply. Check out mypatriotsupply.com. That is mypatriotsupply.com. You've heard me talk about My Patriot Supply before because I trust them when it comes to my family's well-being. We use My Patriot Supply. I just got the word, and they've done something they've never done before. Right now, you can get their best-selling mega 3-month emergency food supply for the same price as the standard kit. For more than $360 of real beef, chicken, plus farm-fresh fruits and vegetables included at no extra charge. Even better, this kit now gives you 2,500 calories a day, more than any other emergency food supply that I've seen. Let's be honest, when things go sideways, you're going to need more than just survival. You need strength, you need energy, you need vitality, you need spirit, you need food. You are 9 meals away from anarchy. Write that down and commit it to memory. You are 9 meals away from anarchy. This kit will be there for you when you need it. Stays fresh for up to 25 years and ships fast and discreetly. If you've been waiting for the right time, this is it. Go to mypatriotsupply.com and claim your mega kit for while this lasts. Go to mypatriotsupply.com. Portions of the Charlie Kirk Show are brought to you in part by mypatriotsupply.com. Okay, this is an amazing story. So I have a new obsession, which is I believe the fight of the 21st century is going to be a fight against the bureaucracy. Not just the bureaucracy in government, but bureaucracy in general. Very similar to how men, as they get older, middle-aged men, develop an intractable, seemingly irreversible beer belly, middle fat. It seems as if government, churches, charities, companies, and of course colleges develop that kind of mid-level management, job justification, paper shuffling, desk worker industry. In fact, bureaucrat literally means desk worker from its original French. Doge exists to try to get rid of the bureaucracy. What do you do here is the lethal weapon against bureaucracy. The question of what do you do here might be the most effective weapon against bloat that I have seen. Well, we have a very special guest, someone that goes to Brown University, so obviously he's very smart, and he decided to do something I love. His name is Alex Shea. I believe that's how you say it. He's Brown University class of 2027, software engineer and a journalist. So what he decided to do, he's a sophomore at Brown University, which is incredibly liberal, as you know. He decided to email 3,800 Brown staff members with a very simple question. Describe what tasks you performed in the past week. Shea said he got about 20 responses to his email, including one of them was F off. Shea created a website called Bloat at Brown, where he listed off every employee at the school and used AI
they're going to take away Brown's federal funding because of DEI and anti-Semitism. But this is even before that, because Brown, get this, Brown costs $93,000 a year for 1 year of college. And I know that you say college is always a scam, Charlie, but it's seeming more and more like that these days. Because where does all this money go? That's an excellent question. And it's pretty much, like you said, 3,805 non-faculty staff members. These are not professors who are teaching the classes. These are people who sit at desks and they push around papers, and nobody exactly knows what they do because they won't tell me, especially. And so I just find that all very suspect and suspicious.
No, first of all, I love this. And I want to just say as a macro point, when high IQ driven, young patriots like yourself get disagreeable against power, I love it because they don't know how to deal with it. So you've created this, we're on radio right now, Alex, so we can't give the exact title, but let's just say BS job subscores. Is that fair to say? And so you score jobs for BS jobs that waste money. So basically you are the customer at Brown for $93,000 a year. You're a journalist. You're trying to figure out what the heck are we paying all this money for in Providence, Rhode Island. You are the client. Brown employs more than 4,400 employees, but fewer than 1,000 are instructors of any kind. So that means 75% of jobs at Brown are not instructors. What BS jobs have you found at Brown University?
Well, that's a great question. So at our website right now, bloat.brownspectator.com, we have about 49 people that are dedicated to DEI roles. Again, these are the people that just cost Brown $510 million from the Trump administration because they're refusing to comply with the directives about DEI. But just in general, it's like there are multiple people, Charlie, that are dedicated to ad sales for the Alumni magazine. For the Alumni I didn't even know that the Alumni magazine ran ads, but apparently one person is not good enough for that. You need to have multiple people running ad sales for the Alumni magazine. There's about 7 full-time people that are on the Alumni magazine in general, in roles in general. But the funny thing is that I couldn't find that many articles that were written by these 7-time full-time staffers because they make freelancers and students write the actual articles. So it's just bloat like that in the Alumni magazine, in all of these various offices that as a student, I wouldn't even think that we had such a thing, that these offices existed, because they don't really interact with students. They're pretty much just behind the scenes, but they're raising the cost of tuition that are making schools like Brown. Like, again, they always say that the Ivy League is supposed to be an economic ladder, that poor kids can go to the Ivy League schools and they'll turn out successful in life. But that is really being put to the test by this enormous price tag and sort of disregard for financial planning of any sort.
Alex, you have there's two components here I want to make sure we cover. First, I want to go through these 5 categories because I think it's hilarious and so astute, and then I want to talk about the disciplinary in action, and then I have a third point that I do want to make. So you have these 5 buckets, if you will, that you have distilled of trying to organize what these people do. I want you to go through them. You have flunky, you have goon, duct taper, box ticker, and taskmaster. Explain.
Right. So, Charlie, I know that you're a conservative, but these categories were actually trumped up by David Graeber, who is an anthropologist, and he's hardly conservative. He's a left anarchist. But I think this is sort of one of the issues, really, that should be apolitical, that people at both ends of the political spectrum should see, is that there are a lot of these people with sort of confusing jobs. And just to run through them, the flunkies are people like administrative assistants. There are a lot of assistants for these mid-level bureaucrats. Why all of these mid-level bureaucrats need assistants, again, is unclear. Are they really that busy? Maybe they are, but maybe. And this is what Graeber says, is that the bureaucrats are just there to make them feel more important. And that also seems like a very plausible explanation. Again, we can't know for sure unless we hear from them, and that's why we sent that email. Goons are those who sort of fight people on behalf of the university, deceive people, everybody in the communications office,
so
essentially.
True. I know the type. That is so. Keep going. Yes.
And in particular, the Brown spokesperson has been putting a lot of misinformation out about me in the press, because he's been saying that that this site is using confidential information. He's been telling that to other reporters, and that's not true. But we can get into that later. But your title, your job description, that's not confidential. The duct tapers are the third category. These are sort of people like think about all the IT staff that is dedicated to maintaining and upkeep of all these various data systems. Like at Brown, the Wi-Fi goes out all the time. The systems, the IT systems are not great. And so instead of just having like an end-to-end solution that is like a well-designed system, they just have a whole lot of IT staff just sitting around fixing things when it breaks, duct taping it, so to say, instead of just designing it well in the first place. The box stickers are essentially people, compliance officers, DEI officers that just go around and they just essentially check boxes to see, are you doing this? Are you doing this? You don't really add any value. They're just making sure that everybody else toes the line. And then the taskmasters are just these mid-level administrators that just boss around the lower level administrators and give them tasks. Maybe they're writing memos. Maybe they're drafting strategic action plans. How this benefits students, I don't know, but I'm sure they think that they are very, very important.
And so put it. This is one of my favorite like distillations. I want all of you to think about when you send your kid to college. So at Brown, just to repeat. 4,400 employees at Brown. 1,000 of them are instructors of any kind. And that's even being generous because that includes teachers' assistants. And 1,000 is a generous number. So there are 3,400 people that are either flunkies, goons, duct tapers, box tickers, or taskmasters for $93,000 a year. And look, this would be even more hilarious if it wasn't tragic. And by the way, Alex, you are a great example as to why they do not want the Ivy League to be based in merit, why they don't want Asians or whites to come to the Ivy League. They just want people. You ask too many questions. You're way too disagreeable for them. You're like, actually, no, what do you do here? Well, what is this? And you're kind of doing your own micro doge. 1 minute, Alex, I want to keep you after the break. But one thing I want to make sure I express. Then I want to get, after the break, we're going to talk about the disciplinary action of this. But if anyone out there, I know someone at Harvard, this should be happening. You should start a whole movement of this. We should have one at Harvard. We should have one at Princeton. We should have one at Yale. We should have one at Stanford, where students just start mass emailing the entire faculty and saying, I go to school here and I pay $100,000 a year. What did you accomplish last week? And start organizing the entire faculty database at the school that you are going into debt for, to justify why they exist. This could start a mass movement. And by the way, I'm going to also push Linda McMahon and the Trump administration to demand this info as well. What do you do here? And organize everybody in those 5 categories. Alex, brilliant. Stay right there. Then we're going to talk about the disciplinary action of this. PatriotMobile.com/Charlie. Think about it. Every day you spend, every dollar you spend is either supporting your values or working against them. In today's economy, where you spend your money matters, that's how we take back our country. Patriot Mobile is leading the way as America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. You'll get exceptional nationwide coverage because, unlike most budget wireless providers, Patriot Mobile has access to all 3 major networks. You can even add 2 numbers on 2 networks or on the phone. Right now, go to PatriotMobile.com/Charlie or call 972-PATRIOT to get a free month of service with promo code Charlie. That is PatriotMobile.com/Charlie. So take a look at it right now at PatriotMobile.com/Charlie. PatriotMobile.com/Charlie is an amazing way that you guys are able to make the switch to support a company that shares your values. If you have a cell phone out there, listen, if you have a cell phone, make the switch today at PatriotMobile.com/Charlie. That is PatriotMobile.com/Charlie. Stop funding woke wireless and go to PatriotMobile.com/Charlie. I'll tell you what, I don't know what Alex Shea is going to do in his life, but he'll be successful. We'll be right back.
American made. And darn proud of it. The Charlie Kirk Show.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com, and subscribe to our podcast. Just a reminder, I'll be at University of South Carolina today, and then I go to Illinois State University tomorrow, and then University of Illinois for an evening event in Urbana-Champaign. On Thursday, I will be going to West Lafayette, Indiana, Purdue University, and wrapping out the week at Michigan State University. Next week, I will be at Boise State University in beautiful Boise, Idaho. And then I will also be at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington. The week after that, I will be in Laramie, Wyoming, at the University of Wyoming for both the Prove Me Wrong and an evening event. And then I'll also be at Texas A&M University, where they say gig 'em and howdy. And that is just a little bit of a taste. We have a lot more campus stops coming. On top of that, we have stuff coming in Boston. We have a lot more California stops. We're not slowing down. We have to keep the pace up. Look, you got to be working hard. The left, they're revving up. They've had rallies and protests and screaming sessions across the country. We have to do more. And at Turning Point USA, we are doing more. Tyranny never sleeps, and neither do we. Stay right there. Okay, the Herzog Foundation is wonderful. Check it out right now. Are you rethinking your kid's educational path, wondering if their current school truly supports your family's values? If so, you're not alone, and the Herzog Foundation is here to help. With the Trump administration working to abolish the federal Department of Education, there's never been a better time to explore Christian education. The Herzog Foundation is your trusted guide to navigating these changes, whether families are considering a Christian school or a hybrid model or homeschooling. They provide the resources families need to make informed decisions. Visit readlion.com to access must-read articles, and don't forget to sign up for the Lion's daily and weekly newsletters. That's readlion.com. Stay informed, stay equipped, and shape your child's future. Readlion.com. Portions of the Charlie Kirk Show are brought to you in part by the Herzog Foundation. Alex Shea continues with us. Alex, if you guys are just joining us, is doging Brown University, which he's exposing me as scam. So you've done this. So let me just make sure. You email all these faculty, you ask these questions. How has the university responded to you? The university that you are paying, Alex Shea.
Right. So this has been reported pretty widely at this point, and I'm backed by FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, and they put out a blog post that pretty much outlines the entire situation. But according to what FIRE is saying is Brown is pursuing a preliminary review against me for 4 different charges. They're saying it's emotional and psychological harm. They're saying violation of operational rules. They're saying misrepresentation. because I said I'm a reporter for the Brown Spectator, and that's not recognized by the Student Activities Office. That must mean it's misrepresentation. And the last charge is invasion of privacy, again, for publishing people's names and job titles that Brown himself publishes on the internet. And so, again, it's not really clear how that's confidential. Now, in Rhode Island, where Brown is we have a state law even that called the Student Journalist Freedom of Expression Act, which protects student journalism, like is in my case. But I think this is really just evidence of double standards that Brown has. I don't know if your audience knows this, Charlie, but Charlie Kirk is also banned from Brown University's campus. This was because of an incident that happened a few years ago where Brown told him he couldn't film. And so Charlie Kirk came to our campus. And he wasn't filming. He was complying with all these rules. But some other students were filming him, and those got posted online. And that was deemed to be in violation of Brown's filming policy. And so now Charlie is unfortunately banned from Brown's campus. But take this into account, what Brown has been doing with these pro-Palestinian protesters. In 2023, a group of about 30 of them were just trespassing in an administrative building. Again, what I'm doing is speech. What they're doing is trespassing. And they actually got arrested and charged with that. And then Brown just decided to drop the charges because they didn't want to inflame tensions or something like that. Then when there was the encampment, the people who were in the encampment, they struck a deal with the Brown administration that they wouldn't be that they wouldn't be held to the normal disciplinary proceedings, and that expulsion and suspension would be off the table for all of them. And again, I think this just shows that there is a clear double standard here about how people are treated. I mean, like myself and Charlie, it's just speech, it's freedom of speech. But when people get into disruptive actions and breaking actual laws, as long as they're on the left, they're pretty much protected.
Yeah, so just to be clear, if you, instead of asking the people that you employ what they do all day long, if you would host, I don't know, like a Students for Justice of Palestine encampment in the middle of Brown's campus, then that's perfectly fine. They would settle with you. But going around and asking bloated bureaucrats that are duct taper, box tickers, that you employ, what do you do all day long, you are subject now to a disciplinary investigation. Alex, 1 minute remaining. Would you say that Brown is a place where, I don't want to, again, scam is kind of my thing, college scam, but how would you describe Brown now after this experience to the country, to the nation? How would you categorize it?
I think it's elitist. That's the way that I would sum it up, is that they're coming after people who espouse more right-leaning, like libertarians and conservatives. They don't come after the far left. The pro-Palestine people who are breaking actual rules. And also just think about the price tag, $93,000 a year. Financial aid is not going to cut it for a lot of people. And so people just can't go to Brown. And so this is elitism, plain and simple. They only want to be accessible to people that are on the coasts that can afford this price tag and have those trendy, progressive, elite perspective. And if you think DEI is bad, even if you just want to criticize the bloat, that's not acceptable at a place like Brown University.
Alex, you're a good man. You're going to succeed in whatever you want to do. And if you ever want to go work for the real Doge, I'll be happy to write you a letter recommendation. We need super geniuses and hyper patriots like yourself that can ask the right questions. And I want to just repeat this. I hope you find counterparts at Cornell, yes, Dartmouth, Blake, but I'm sure they're not as bad. Columbia, there should be Doges of every single major Ivy League school, every school in the country. And boy, I hope Brown, metaphorically, has to be, let's just say, go through a transformational process. I'll be kinder. Alex, thanks so much. God bless you, man. Second hour coming up.
They tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to guns or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna. Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room in a culture that celebrates the weak. Show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
To this Real America's Voice news break, I'm Terrence Bates. One can argue the fountain of youth is inside of you. The ability to slow aging and live a healthier lifestyle is as basic as stimulating your cells. My next guest has made a life and a business out of doing just that. John Jubilee is the founder of Energized Health. He joins me this morning with more. John, always good to see you.
Great to see you, Terrence.
So let's get right to it. Cellular hydration, that really is the fountain of youth in your estimation.
Well, it really is, Terrence. You know, think about it. Any farmer or any gardener knows, you know, how do you have healthy plants? How do you have a healthy farm? How do you have a healthy garden? It's all about hydration, right? If you don't water the plant, next thing you know, first it shrivels and then it dies. And it's the same with us, Terrence. If we're not hydrated, we're going to shrivel, and then we're going to be in pain, and then we're going to die. So cellular hydration is the fountain of youth.
And it's a way to help people transform not only their bodies, but also their minds. And you and I have talked about that quite a bit, but that's also part of the healing process. It's not just the physical, it's also the mental. And then you can add in the spiritual if you'd like.
Well, it really is. You know, God made us, He made us a spirit. You know, we live in a body, and then we have our soul, which is our mind, our will, and our emotions. And we need to be healthy in all three of those. Think about, Terrence, the fact that if somebody, a lot of times when someone loses a spouse of many decades that they've been married to, it's common for them to die within 1 year, the other person. And why? Because their mental and their spiritual side is so sad, it just wants to go be with the other person. And so there is such a connection between the mind, the body, and the spirit. The average life expectancy of someone who retires, so when they have their life is tied up in their work and they retire, they die within 7 years. Well, why? Because they lost their purpose in life. It's not even because they had a physical decline. It's because their spirit is broken from losing its purpose, and the mind is sad from not active anymore like it used to be on that job every day. So we need to be healthy in our mind, our body, and our spirit. But Terrence, I'll give you a couple quick numbers in the Bible here. Abraham lived to be 175 years old, and then he had a son named Isaac. He lived to be 180 years old. And then Isaac had a son named Jacob. He lived to be 147 years old. Interestingly, I could make a case. The reason that Jacob didn't live as long, he thought Joseph was dead for 14 years. It broke his father's heart. And so he lived about 30 years less, than his father and his grandfather. So there is such a mind-body connection with us. We got to be at a cellular level, and we have to be healthy in all three areas.
Let's talk lifestyle real quickly. You've seen people get back to doing things like hiking and biking, dancing, golfing, all the things that they thought they had to give up forever as a result of a body decline. So how does cellular hydration make that possible, even after years of joint pain or fatigue or other sorts of issues?
Well, what happens here is when we get our intercellular hydration, we regrow our cartilage. And so now our joints are back how they were when they were 17 years old. So the only reason people stop hiking or dancing or doing the things they love is because they don't have the physical strength that they used to have. But do you know that muscle is 3 parts water? It's 3 parts water, and it's 1 part protein. So it's 3 times more important to have cellular hydration if you want to have lean muscle than it is even to eat protein or lift weights. That's the power of cellular hydration. And so we have clients in their 80s and 90s, Terrence, that are gaining 10, 15 pounds of solid muscle. They're climbing 7 mountains. They're running these half marathons. We had a 92-year-old guy. He won the rowing championship for 70 and over at 92 years old. We got an 85-year-old guy that he qualified for the Olympics pickleball, 55 and over, 85 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
We really can be healthy and do the things we love at any age, but we got to get healthy at a cellular level.
John Jubilee, EnergizedHealth.com. Go there and find out more information. Always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Welcome back, everybody. Live from Bitcoin.com studios, sort of remote version of it here. I'm Andrew Colvett, executive producer of The Charlie Kirk Show, and I'm joined by the one and only Blake Neff, one of our producers here on the show. Blake, this has been an action-packed morning when it comes to the economy, financials, the tariff war, the trade war. Charlie, for those wondering, had to depart to a campus stop, and so we were lucky to kind of squeeze him in. Blake, you and I are going to be taking it from here. We also have EJ Antoni joining us at 1:30 Eastern, economist from the Heritage Foundation, so that we have to look forward to as well. But Blake, let's just bring our audience up to speed of what's happened in the last few hours here. We have seen the largest, just by point, maybe not by percentage, but by points, a 2,600 point swing on the Dow. It was down like, let's say 1,500 points. It swung up to as high as about 850, 860, based on some rumors that President Trump was considering a 90-day pause in his tariff regime. That turned out to be fake news. But in the meantime, we've seen the market fluctuate. Currently, it's down about 940, the Dow. But here's what I would say to everybody out there watching, wondering what the heck is going on. don't pay too close of attention to the market currently. There is a lot of moving pieces. There is a lot that is changing in flux any given moment. So everybody just take a breath, breathe. Let's just assume that the market has factored a lot of this stuff in. There will continue to be market shifts and fluctuations. Nevertheless, we don't know where all this is going to go. We don't know where it's going to land, but the sky is not falling, I assure you. Despite a lot of prognosticators and economists awfulizing on the internet, awfulizing on business shows and the like. So, Blake, I want to get your take on this. I know that you are, let's just say, in the spectrum of pro-tariff or anti-tariff. You're sort of, I would say, somewhere in the middle. So I'm curious about your take of what you've seen this morning. We were on chats Sunday night, basically predicting, I would say, a much bigger market collapse than what we've ultimately seen. Now, the day's not done yet. We're down 840 as I'm looking at it right now. What is your take on the news that's unfolded so far?
Well, it's been back and forth all day. The line I saw was when there was basically a false report that a 90-day pause was likely or imminent, the overall stock markets rose about $2 trillion in value. And
$3.
Yeah, $3 trillion maybe. And, it's gone up and down all the day. And I think probably the reason it's more moderate is I think there's a greater sense that some sort of deals are likely to be made. We have the European Union offering to junk a bunch of tariffs. We have Vietnam offering to eliminate all tariffs if they can make a deal. And we have Trump saying we're basically open to negotiating with every country that isn't China. And if you take the U.S. trade deficit, most trade the U.S. does is not with China. So if you reduce the range of trade war from every single country in the world to just China, that's undoing a lot of what we've announced in the past week. As you said, I'm more in the middle on this. I would say what I feel and what a lot of people feel concerned about is the sense that this was like just taking a giant, it was like they wanted to push one single button to achieve everything they wanted to do. There's been reporting that one of the offices in the Trump White House, they actually did go and they figured out what would a reciprocal tariff be on every tariff on U.S. goods. So they look at what actual tariffs are they imposing in France? What are they imposing in Vietnam? What are they imposing in Great Britain? And so on. And then they were going to match those point for point. And then apparently the White House just thought let's just go for the easiest one. And so they did this trade deficit based calculation. And what's missing from that is what do we say our goal here is? Our goal is to bring more manufacturing back to America. But when it's just like this, it's not finely tuned to that purpose. So, for example, you're doing a flat tariff on everything. You're not doing, for example, a tariff on finished goods, but then no tariff on raw materials. That would encourage people to bring raw materials into the U.S. and then make stuff here. Instead, it's just basically a hike on everything very abruptly. And I think a lot of people are very worried about what the impact of that will be.
Yeah, no, and I think that is one of the critiques that I've heard floated, that it's a sledgehammer when a scalpel was needed and that sort of thing. And I will say that, listen, President Trump, he did not hide that this was going to happen. Now, we didn't understand the details or how it was going to be, sort of put into place, put into practice. Nevertheless, this is not a mystery. President Trump has been very, very clear about this. And I happen to, and Blake, you and I have talked about this privately. I am a true believer in this strategy. I hear every one of the pushbacks, and I absolutely, disagree. I will say, they could have done it without so much pomp and circumstance. They could have just done it quietly and done it country by country. I would have been fine with that. But directionally, here's what I mean. I completely agree that there needed to be, as Jack Posobiec calls, a reset of the Great Reset. We needed a reset of the way that we do business with our trading partners. And I do believe that President Trump's art of the deal brinkmanship can be unnerving for the market. It can be unnerving for many people that are just watching it take place. But the base that voted for Trump wanted change. And there are clips after clips after clips of, farmers, beef ranchers that are saying, yes, thank you, because all of these other countries have been able to sell into America for years, and we haven't been able to do the same to those countries, Australia, Argentina, whatever. This is recalibrating different parts of the economy, and that's going to be rough and bumpy for a little while. But I think what is very clear after this morning is that President Trump is dead serious. Peter Navarro is dead serious. Howard Lutnick is dead serious about resetting and recalibrating a lot of these trade negotiations. Now, one of the pieces of news that came across the wire this morning was out of the EU, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and play this clip. This is what I think is a good sign, and I'll explain on the other side of it. 136.
We stand ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners, because Europe is always ready for a good deal, so we keep it on the table. But we are also prepared to respond through countermeasures and defend our interests.
So this was European Commission President Ursula, that's quite the name, von der Leyen. And she says the EU stands ready for a 0 tariff deal. Now, she makes it sound like this is something they do all the time. Everything's fine. I don't know why we couldn't have just, gotten together and hammered this out. Well, here's the problem. They couldn't hammer this out because the EU are really good negotiators. The United States has been locked in by a free trading, I would say, cult that sold a lot of our workers down the river. Meanwhile, EU has been very strategic about protecting its industry. And so why is she willing to say this now? She's willing to say it because President Trump is playing hardball, and the world is quickly catching up to the fact that we're not messing around. Now, yeah, we've lost trillions in market value over this trade war, this tariff policy, to adjust essentially a $1 to $1.5 trillion trade deficit. And a lot of people say $8 trillion in market cap is not worth a $1.5 trillion trade deficit. You have to expand that over years, folks. And you have to also assume the human price that has been paid as a result over years of these trade tariffs and these trade barriers that these countries put up. So guess what? As soon as we get resolution on this, you're going to see that market cap shoot right back up. More from the Charlie Kirk Show. We'll be right back.
researchers than the CDC. Yeah, may not be saying much. It's the Charlie Kirk Show.
All right, welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show. Andrew Colvett in for the one and only Charlie Kirk at our mobile Bitcoin.com studio here. This is actually a pretty relevant point to bring up. I'm going to tell you about whyrefi.com. There is billions and billions of dollars in private student loan debt. And by the way, the total is about $300 billion of student loan debt. About $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed. Whyrefi.com refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that other people won't touch. And actually, Whyrefi is out right now with Charlie in the field doing a campus stop, and we're very excited about them. Great partners of the show. Great partners of the show. Great partners of Turning Point and of Charlie. So please check out whyrefi.com. They can reduce your monthly payment and guarantee interest rates under 6%, ensuring that it's affordable, that you can actually take care of the monthly payments. So with whyrefi.com, if you are one of those people that has distressed private student loan debt, of which there are so many of you, there's about $45 billion on the market, they can refinance it for you when anybody else out on the market will not do it. So please check out whyrefi.com, whyrefi.com. If you feel stuck, you don't have to feel stuck. Check it out. Please check out whyrefi.com. All right, so much more to get to this hour. So much breaking news. And again, we have EJ Antoni joining us at 1:30 Eastern. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Great economist. And one other point I want to make here, Blake. And I said this at the break, and we're going to get into the Bill Ackman stuff when we join back. This is, if you are worried about how many trillions, if you hear them bring up how many trillions has been wiped away in net wealth on the market, just see, as soon as there was a 90-day pause, $3 trillion rushed back into the market in about 10 minutes. So just everybody take a breath, stay the course. We'll be right back. Kirk Show, executive producer Andrew Colvett in for Charlie Kirk at the mobile Bitcoin.com studios. I'm joined by Blake Neff extraordinaire, Rome historian, who has studied the fall of nations. Blake, is the sky falling? What does Bill Ackman say? Break down this whole Bill Ackman story for us.
Of course. So Bill Ackman, he's a Wall Street veteran, very opinionated. He's been a very loud voice on Twitter and then X over the past few years. He very notably was one of the he's generally mostly a Democrat donor historically, and he is one of the most prominent voices who shifted towards being a pretty vocal Trump supporter in 2024. He denounced DEI. He was very involved in attacking universities like Harvard after the 10/7 attacks. So he's a guy who generally in the middle has moved towards supporting the right, probably a good barometer of like the centrist Wall Street money person. And he has been pretty upset about the tariff announcement, and he's been on a tear the last couple of days on X. He had a very long post last night that's already over 12 million views. I can't read the whole thing. I want to get to a few excerpts from it. He says that, the country is 100% behind President Trump on fixing a global system of tariffs that has disadvantaged the country. But, he says, business is a confidence game, and confidence depends on trust. He continues later, by placing massive and disproportionate tariffs on our friends and our enemies alike, and thereby launching a global economic war against the whole world at once, we are in the process of destroying confidence in our country as a trading partner, as a place to do business, and as a market to invest capital. He continues further down. What CEO and what board of directors will be comfortable making large, long-term economic commitments in the United States in the middle of an economic nuclear war? That's the term he uses. He says it's not just big companies that will suffer, small and medium-sized businesses will experience much greater pain because almost no business can pass through an overnight massive increase in the cost of business, and they can't pass that on to their customers. So long story short, he's saying the president has an opportunity on Monday, he was saying this yesterday, to call a timeout and have time to execute on fixing an unfair tariff system. And he got pretty angry because just a short time after he posted this, he then followed up and he said, I just figured out why Howard Lutnick in the Trump administration is indifferent to the stock market crashing. He and Cantor Fitzgerald, the company that he was from, are long bonds. He profits when our economy implodes. It's a bad idea to pick a Secretary of Commerce whose firm is levered on long fixed income. It is an irreconcilable conflict of interest. And then this morning, he walked back from that. He said, it was unfair of me to lash out at Howard Lutnick. I don't think he is pursuing his self-interest. I'm sure he is doing the best he can. It is not an easy job. But I, Bill Ackman, am frustrated watching what I believe to be a major policy error occur after our country and our president have been making huge economic progress, and that is now at risk due to tariffs. So this is just one guy, but he is speaking for a lot of people, I think. There's a lot of people who are very anxious about what the tariff policy is. They're warning that this will have dramatic consequences if it's not paused or mitigated in some way. And we can see their angst playing out in the markets every day.
Well, and I will agree with Ackman. I think he's a very smart guy. I don't necessarily think he's a true believer in sort of reforming, reshaping the American economy, especially with our trade deficits. I think he likes it. I don't know that he's got the guts or the true belief and the conviction to stay the course when it gets rocky. And I'm a little bit different in that way. I think, where I will agree with him is that businesses, markets need predictability. And so the sooner that we can get to a predictable baseline, the better it will be long term. And so whether that baseline is the 10% tariff across the board, so be it, or if we're going to have right now, Trump, basically what happened with China, to bring the audience up to speed with that, is we essentially had 54% tariffs on China. They came back with reciprocal tariffs or, retaliatory tariffs of 34%. Trump now went to Truth Social and said, listen, we're going to hit you with an additional tariff of 50%, which would essentially put the tariff over 100% on Chinese imported goods. I think China is his number one nemesis here that he wants to take off the chessboard. And he's playing some high-risk poker. There's no doubt about it. Basically saying China cannot survive without being able to trade all these goods into the United States. Now, there's going to be other problems for us that comes along with China having supply chain issues into the United States. But that is the number one foe that Trump is after. It's very, very clear. So I happen to think that, listen, the sky's not falling. It's going to get bumpy, but we got to stay the course right now. We'll be right back. Dan Tony joins us next.
Terrence Bates here with your Real America's Voice news break. Thanks so much for joining us today. We begin with a view of the White House. President Trump hosting his latest high-profile visitor, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, arriving in the White House about 5 minutes ago. You can see him pulling up in the car here, only to be met by President Trump. The two exchanged a couple of quick pleasantries, before ultimately walking in the door there at the White House. We, of course, are waiting for the two to host a news conference and to sit down here in short order. The moment that happens, we'll take you there live. But as you can see, the two men shaking hands here, waving to the media, and then entering the White House, where they're going to be meeting and discussing a number of issues. We expect that they'll talk about Iran, obviously the situation in Gaza, and the latest tariffs that the Trump administration has put on Israel as well as the rest of the country. Again, a live report from the White House coming up here in short order. We'll take you there. In the meantime, dozens of countries are reportedly ready to negotiate in the face of President Trump's tariffs. Taiwan's president is offering zero tariffs in return for the U.S. dropping its trade barriers. And as I just said, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu already at the White House right now looking for a reprieve from the 17% tariffs against his country. When it comes to China and the European Union, the president says his tariffs are all about leveling the playing field after being ripped off for years.
We have massive surplus countries that we're dealing with. We have massive deficits. We've got to straighten that out because you can't continue to be that way. It's been that way for years now, and it can't go on any longer. And we're the piggy bank. We have all the advantages. Forget markets for a second. We have all the advantages. We're going to straighten out. We're going to become a wealthy nation again, wealthy like never before.
U.S. customs officials are reportedly collecting the across-the-board 10% tariffs already. The higher reciprocal tariffs of between 11 and 50% on individual countries are set to take effect Wednesday. A weekend of storms and massive flooding have at least 18 people dead in communities from Texas to Ohio drying out and preparing for a week of insurance claims. Look at this water here. It's a mess, and lots of cities and counties are in states of emergency right now. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'm Terrence Bates.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Back to the mobile Bitcoin.com studios here. Charlie's on the road right now, so we're filling in on this busy news day. And honored to be joined by Dr. E.J. Antoni. He's an economist over at Heritage. Dr. Antoni, welcome to the show. Thanks for making some time here on a breaking news day. Sum up for us what you are seeing. The market looks like Dow is down 480. I mean, it was down much lower than that. Then it shot up to about plus 840 on some fake news of a 90-day pause in the in the tariff war. Now we're back down at 450, something like that. We're hearing news is about 50 plus countries that are at the negotiating table. We've got Bibi Netanyahu has just arrived at the White House. Lots happening. Make it make sense for us.
Well, Andrew, thanks for having me. Unfortunately, a lot that we have to go on right now is really just rumor, and that's why there's so much volatility in the marketplace. Now, there are a few things that we know for sure, right? Like you mentioned, Benjamin Netanyahu being in town. Like that's something we can definitively say is the case. But as far as nations being at the negotiating table, again, there's rumors that there's a lot more. There's rumors that there's a lot less. We have heard some EU officials go on the record saying that they are willing on certain things to go to zero tariffs if the U.S. does as well. So again, there is definitely some good progress here. But overall, there's a lot of rumor, which means there's a lot of volatility. Another thing that we know for sure was that because there were so many short positions on Wall Street, as soon as we saw a little bit of an uptick today in stocks, there was a rush to cover. In other words, people were starting to buy stocks for fear that if the price went up, they'd have to buy them at an even higher price. Now, normally stock prices going up would be a good thing, but in the case of a short position, it's exactly the opposite. You're betting on things going down, not up. So whatever the case, This all caused a tremendous amount of not just volatility, but a huge swing. The Dow had its biggest intraday swing ever, moving over 2,600 points between its lowest and its highest point of the trading day, and we're only halfway done at this point. So, again, tons of rumors, which means tons of volatility. Markets are looking for direction. They're looking for definitive answers. We thought we were going to get that last week with the tariff announcement, and unfortunately, because of the way these tariffs have been structured, we've gotten exactly the opposite of clear answers. We've gotten a lot of misdirection.
Yeah, I want to go into that idea of the way these tariffs are structured, Dr. Antoni, because there's been a lot of back and forth, especially on social media, about that some people feel that President Trump shot too high on the tariffs, that they're not one-to-one, but they say they're factoring in trade deficits as well as other non-tariff related trade barriers. Basically, President Trump, if I was looking at this, I would say that he is very provably a true believer that he wants to get equal trade, meaning no trade deficit ongoing with the United States and our trading partners. I predict that this is going to be a fairly long-term struggle and a trade war, if we want to use that word. What are you seeing the same? And please comment on the way that these tariffs were structured in the first place. Was it done right? Was there things we could have done better? The floor is yours.
Andrew, these are great questions. Thank you for asking them. And it's really something I think where we need to set the record straight, because there is so much misinformation out there. There are way too many versions of the truth here. There's only one truth. So here it is. What President Trump wanted were true reciprocal tariffs. In other words, he wanted a kind of economic golden rule, if you will, where we say to other countries, look, you are imposing these tariff and non-tariff barriers on us. You are penalizing our exporters and therefore our workers. And so we're going to do exactly the same thing to you, holding up a mirror, as it were, to these other countries. That is what he tasked members of his administration with, like the Commerce Department, like the U.S. Trade Representative, et cetera. That was the whole reason for the delay, for example. Waiting until April 2nd was to give those folks time to calculate what are the average effective tariff rates among all these different countries around the world. Instead, what we got was something that has literally nothing to do. Let me be perfectly clear. These tariff rates have nothing to do with other nations' tariff and non-tariff barriers. They simply looked at the ratio of imports to exports and only looked at the imports and exports of products, not even services. And so at the end of the day, you're simply looking at trade deficits. And again, it's just the trade deficit in terms of goods. Unfortunately, that means for some countries where we actually have an overall trade surplus, maybe we sell them shoes. They sell us shoes, so we're buying shoes from them, let's say, and then maybe we turn around and sell them financial services. And they are buying much more in financial services from us than we buy shoes from them. That's a trade surplus for the United States, except that according to this formula, it's counted as a trade deficit, and we impose a penalty tariff rate on that country for having that trade deficit in goods with them. That's a ludicrous trade policy. It's not going to get us what we want, which is more free trade. That's the whole point of reciprocal tariffs. It's to force other nations to get rid of their tariff and non-tariff barriers so that just as foreign nations have access to our consumer markets, our producers can have access to their consumer markets. That's the goal here. We want more free trade, not less. It's not that we're protectionists. It's that, we want true reciprocal free trade, free and fair trade, what some people call it. And the problem with how these tariffs are structured, because they're not actually looking at other nations' tariff and non-tariff barriers, is that we have imposed penalty rates on many countries who don't deserve them. Why on earth is it we have a tariff rate on Israel that's almost twice as high as the one on Iran? Why is it that China has a tariff rate that's just, frankly, middle of the pack? They should have the highest rate among any nation because they engage in the most trade abuses, whether that's manipulation of the currency, subsidizing industry, and dumping artificially low-priced products in other countries' markets. You have slave labor. I can go on and on, whether it's currency manipulation, et cetera. The list just goes on and on when it comes to China and all of their unfair trade practices. And yet again, they have a middle-of-the-road tariff rate. So The issue here is not the goal, right? President Trump absolutely has the right goal, and I even think that his method, if you will, or his tactic of reciprocal tariffs was a good one. The issue here is how that was implemented. The issue here is that he has people within his administration who, frankly, have not served him well enough, who did not provide him with the reciprocal tariff schedule that was promised. That's the issue here, and again. If you look at markets' reaction, when it was first announced we were going to have this 10% across-the-board tariff, markets actually rallied initially. The futures markets went up, I think, about 1.5% on that news. But then all of a sudden, when this tariff schedule appeared, where it made absolutely no sense, these numbers clearly did not come from tariff and non-tariff barriers. That's when futures started to tumble. And then we've had now 3 days, basically, where the markets have really taken it on the chin. Again, this all has to do with uncertainty. People don't know where we're going to go from here, and that's a problem.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I mean, President Trump, I believe everything that I'm seeing and everything that I've seen from him historically is dead set on correcting a trade deficit that we currently are experiencing, right? Let's just play one of many clips that are out there. Let's play 107. This is 2012, President Trump talking about tariffs. 107.
And I said, somebody said, well, what would you do? What can you do? So easy. I drop a 25% tax on China. And, you know, I said to somebody that it's really the messenger. The messenger is important. I could have one man say, we're going to tax you 25%. And I could say another, listen, we're going to tax you 25%.
I mean, there's tons of these clips around. So, I mean, here's what and he's been consistent throughout the years. And I think he's seeing this moment as his one opportunity where he's early on in his term to seize this issue and push it forward. Now, I will agree that the way it was done, I think, has spooked the markets. I think you could have done it a different way. So let's game this out then, Dr. Antoni. So where would you like to see his strategy go from here? Because Trump is going to claim a win one way or the other. We know politically that's going to be part of the next step. What does he have to do to sort of claim plausibly that his tariff and his policies have effectuated the change he wanted, while also rewarding the markets, bringing everybody to a stable place with predictability?
Well, I think one of the key things is going to be during these negotiating processes with different countries will be to come up with actual average effective tariff rates. So you look at a nation like Canada, look at all of their tariffs, but also their non-tariff barriers, their quotas, for example, that they put on things like American dairy products. You know, that really hurts our dairy farmers. So figure out, okay, what is the mathematical equivalent in terms of an overall tariff? And so say to Canada, look, if you are willing to get rid of X, Y, and Z tariffs or non-tariff barriers that you currently have in place, we will reduce this tariff rate by a certain amount, okay? And that's your negotiating tool. But the problem with, again, with the current tariff schedule, when there is no real relationship between those trade barriers and the rate, some of these nations are coming to the negotiating table with their arms up in the air saying, we have no idea what we're supposed to do here. We have no idea how we can actually get these tariff rates down. So I think some further explanation from the White House and some further clarification on what the actual rates should look like would go a long way. The other really big thing is that it seems like we've kind of put the cart before the horse in a certain sense. You know, what this economy really needs is supply-side policies. We need drastic cuts to government spending, to taxes, to regulation. We need an energy production boom in this country. And so by getting tariffs first, without all of those other things, you know, the American middle class who has been drowning, it's like we just threw them an anchor without first building them a boat. And so it is imperative that we get things like the tax cut across the finish line. And also what I would really like to see from Congress, this isn't just the administration's fault. Congress has been painfully slow to act on this. So I would love to see Congress in the reconciliation process where we get the tax bill through to include in that process this 10% kind of baseline tariff that the president has put in place. Put that into statute, but do it as a border adjustment tax. And that has a lot of different advantages. First, it gives a huge benefit to our exporters, which encourages production here, encourages manufacturing, and encourages American jobs, which is tremendous. But it also puts the tariff only on imports. So you're not going to have things like the car industry, where a car part may cross the border between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada half a dozen times before it goes into the final car assembly. You don't want that to get hit with a tax every single time. So a border adjustment tax solves a lot of those problems. And the other great thing by putting it in statute is the fact that now you can include that in the calculation of the reconciliation process so that all the revenues can be used to reduce income taxes.
Dr. Antoni, gotta hit a break. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Relentless in spirit. You're listening to The Charlie Kirk Show.
All right, welcome back to The Charlie Kirk Show. Andrew Colvett in for Charlie, who's on his campus tour this week. Want to welcome back Dr. E.J. Antoni from Heritage. Dr. Antoni, you were talking about something, and I think it's a nuanced point, but I think it's incredibly important because you brought up the reconciliation package. Now, there was some waffling, and I would say Congress was attempting to water down some of these spending cuts, the tax, extending Trump's tax cuts. There was, you've got the moderates and you've got the fiscal hawks. And what we were getting was a muddled mess. I do think one of the unintended consequences, positive consequences of what we're seeing in the markets is now Congress has added incentive to ensure that we are getting the supply side relief that you're talking about, meaning, are we going to get deregulation? Are we going to get these tax cuts extended? Are we also going to add this 10% baseline tariff, or you categorize it a different way, but what that does is it essentially builds in that revenue into this reconciliation package. Continue on with that, because I think it's a really important point that nobody's really bringing up at this point.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Basically, because these different tariffs, which are going to generate revenue, these tariffs are being put in place by the executive and not put in statute by the legislature, they can't be counted in the reconciliation process in terms of revenue that's going to come into the Treasury. And that's so important because under reconciliation, this is supposed to be a process by which you take an existing budget and you basically just tweak it. And so you're not supposed to have drastic changes to either revenue or expenditures. You're supposed to essentially have no effect. It should even out. So if we're going to make a change like reducing marginal tax rates on income taxes, which is terrific, that's a great thing. It's exactly what the economy needs. It's what the middle class needs. They need tax relief. But now you're going to need to offset that somewhere. And I understand the fact that there's a Laffer curve effect here. In other words, as you reduce tax rates, that increases economic activity, which grows your tax base. And if you grow the tax base faster than the tax rate declines, overall tax revenue actually increases. That's what we saw during the first Trump administration. The problem is that's not how the Congressional Budget Office scores it. And so you need what they sometimes call an offset to the reduction in personal income tax rates. And a great way to do that would be to take the revenue that's going to come in from a tariff, a border adjustment tax is what we should really have. And then you can now essentially shift some of the tax burden onto foreigners, which is great from an economic standpoint because there is actually an externality at play here. It is our Navy that patrols the world's sea lanes. It is our Navy at our expense that keeps the ocean safe for international trade. And so it only makes sense that other nations would help pay that expense, and a great way for them to do it would be to tax the very thing that our Navy is supporting, which again is international trade.
I totally agree. I think that's really well said, Dr. Antoni. I want to switch gears slightly here. And this clip was making the rounds. It was Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent. He sat down with Tucker Carlson, and he made this pretty remarkable statement. Now, I want to factor in what Scott Bessent says here in this clip, and then kind of use that to understand the way the market is reacting. Is it an overreaction? Are the wrong people incentivized in the wrong ways here? So let's go ahead and play cut 124.
And look, I'm not happy with what's going on in the market today, but the distribution of equities across households, the top 10% of Americans own 88% of equities. 88% of the stock market. The next 40% owns 12% of the stock market. The bottom 50 has debt. They have credit card bills, they rent their homes, they have auto loans, and we've got to give them some relief.
So, Dr. Antoni, let me frame it this way. There seems to be a disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street. And obviously, when Trump has done this tariff regimen, we are seeing Wall Street panic. They're unsure. There's no predictability. I understand that. And the point is this recalibration of our economy a way to make it so that Main Street finally gets that relief and Wall Street's just going to have to take it on the chin? Or is there a way to make them both win?
That's a great question, Andrew. And look, it's not that we need to redistribute wealth from Wall Street to Main Street. The redistribution of wealth is not the answer here. Instead, what we primarily want is we want to focus on Main Street growing. Now, the good news for Wall Street is the fact that when Main Street does better, Wall Street will too, right? The problem is that in this country, we haven't had that happen in a very, very long time. Instead, Wall Street has continued to do better at the expense of Main Street. When you have runaway inflation, for example, what goes up in price? Everything. The price of a home goes up, rent goes up, food goes up. But you know what else goes up? Equities. So stocks appreciate in price tremendously. Those who already own homes, those who own an apartment complex, let's say, whatever the case may be, all of those assets are going to rise in price. And so for the people who have essentially already established a wealth position, they do just fine. But everyone else, as the secretary was just saying, they're forced to take on a lot of debt. Homes become perpetually out of reach. The median mortgage payment on a home today is literally twice as high as it was 4 years ago. In other words, under the Biden administration, the median price home became twice as expensive. That's obscene. Yes. And that's why for the first time since the Great Depression, people think they're not going to be able to achieve the standard of living that their parents had. So this whole reordering of global trade is not about trying to penalize Wall Street or force the market to tank. No, the reason the markets are tanking right now is because they're looking for direction. They're trying to figure out what exactly is this new world order going to look like.
No, I totally agree. I think you're 100% right. What they want is predictability. They're not. It's almost like the market isn't rejecting tariffs on its face. What it's rejecting is, can we predict what the basic operating assumptions are for businesses internationally. And by the way, just as we're talking here, Dr. Antoni, we're seeing some green. The S&P 500 looks up. The NASDAQ looks back up. The Dow's down 200. It was down much more. I'm not sure what the if there's any signals. Yeah, I'm not sure what's any signals causing this. But hey, perhaps we end on a high note here, Dr. Antoni, that the sky is not falling. We're going to get some resolution here. Stay the course. Keep your wits about you. But your points are well made. Thank you for making the time on a busy breaking news day, Dr. Antoni.
No, Andrew, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll probably have you back on this week as the news keeps shifting. So take a look for texts coming your way. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with more Charlie Kirk.